The throne room of the Vekari Hive-Court had never known silence like this. 300 delegates stood frozen mid-breath. Queen Solvane Threx-Ai, absolute sovereign of the 9 hive systems, had just given a command that had never once in 4,000 years gone unanswered. Step aside, human. She had said it the way one might brush a fly from a wine glass, bored, dismissive, final. And every fleet commander in that chamber, Vekari, Doskani, Ferothi, even the neutral Grail observers, had turned to salute the man standing at the base of her throne instead, not her, him, a single human in a gray, unadorned uniform, hands clasped behind his back, standing perfectly still while 40 admirals of 6 different species pressed fists to chests in the old salute of battlefield command. Queen Solvane's antennae flattened against her skull, the Vekari sign of pure, unfiltered shock. "Explain," she hissed, "why my own warfleet salutes a creature I have not even acknowledged as a diplomat." The human, Colonel Marcus Reyes, though almost no one in this room knew his name yet, finally turned to face her. "Because 3 days ago, Your Majesty," he said quietly, "I was the only one who told them the truth. 3 days earlier, the Vekari Hive-Court had summoned humanity's ambassador for what was supposed to be a routine trade negotiation. Earth's fledgling compact fleet, barely 200 ships against the 9 hive systems' 12,000, had been granted an audience out of what the Vekari called amused curiosity. Marcus Reyes wasn't even supposed to be there. He was a logistics officer, third in a diplomatic chain of 5, sent only because the actual ambassador had fallen ill from an allergic reaction to Vekari cuisine 40 minutes before the summit. He walked into the throne room in a spare uniform, 2 sizes too big, clutching a datapad with numbers he barely understood, and sat in the lowest chair at the table, the seat reserved by Vekari custom for the least significant guest. Queen Solvane didn't even look at him. "Your species," she said to the empty air above the human delegation, "wishes to purchase stabilized wormhole coordinates through hive territory. The price is simple. Bow. Submit your fleet registry codes. Accept Vekari oversight of your border systems." The senior Doskani trade envoy, a segmented creature with mirrored compound eyes, leaned toward Marcus and spoke in the mocking sing-song reserved for species considered beneath negotiation. "It is generous, little human. The hive rarely offers terms instead of conquest." Marcus said nothing for a long moment. Then he stood up, but no one expected what happened next. "Before anyone signs anything," Marcus said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands, "someone should check the reactor cores on the escort fleet outside." The chamber went still. "Explain yourself," Queen Solvane said, irritation flickering in her mandibles. Marcus swallowed hard. "Your escort ships, the Cauldron-class cruisers, they're running a coolant mixture rated for deep space patrol, not atmospheric proximity to a star this close. I saw the readings on the docking scan when we came in. If those cores run another 6 hours at this heat exposure, you're looking at cascade failure. Not in one ship, in all of them. They're sister-built, same batch, same flaw." Silence, then laughter. Vekari laughter, dry and clicking, rippling across the chamber. "You," the Doskani envoy said, "a cargo officer, claimed to understand Vekari reactor engineering better than the engineers who built it?" "I don't understand your engineering," Marcus admitted. "I understand thermal stress curves. That's not the same thing. But it's enough to know your fleet is about to lose ships for no reason except pride." Queen Solvane's antennae twitched. Not with anger this time, but with something colder. "Calculation. Prove it," she said, "or be executed for insulting the Hive-Court before every delegate present." Everything changed in the next few seconds. Marcus didn't have clearance to access Vekari fleet diagnostics. He had a stolen glance at a docking readout and a battered datapad running translation software that barely worked. He had 6 hours to prove he wasn't lying. or he'd never see Earth again. He spent the first hour simply trying to get anyone to listen. The human delegation's actual ambassador, feverish and pale, tried to intervene through a comlink from the medical bay, urging Marcus to apologize and retreat quietly. He refused. "If I'm wrong," he told the ambassador, "I've embarrassed us and I'll take the fall alone. But if I'm right and I say nothing, people die. I'm not doing that math wrong twice." Nobody knew what the human was hiding, not even himself. Just how right he was about to be, he convinced a junior Vekari engineer named Kessa Vol-Ethi, young, ambitious, quietly resentful of a caste system that kept her from real authority, to run an unauthorized scan on one cruiser's core. The results came back at the 4-hour mark. Coolant degradation, 71%. Estimated cascade failure, 2 hours. 40 minutes. Kessa's compound eyes widened as she stared at the readout. This shouldn't be possible. These ships passed inspection." "Inspected by whom?" Marcus asked. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. The truth stunned the entire chamber when she brought it before the court. Queen Solvane watched the emergency evacuation of 11 cruisers with an expression none of her advisors could read. Coolant lines failed exactly as Marcus predicted, exactly at the window he'd calculated, not because he understood Vekari technology, but because heat was heat, stress was stress, and physics didn't care what species asked the question. 2,300 Vekari crew were pulled from ships that would have become drifting tombs. The queen descended from her throne, something she had not done for a foreign delegate in over a century, and stood before Marcus Reyes, still in his ill-fitting uniform, still exhausted, still trembling faintly from adrenaline he didn't know how to process. "You had no authority to make this claim," she said. "No standing, no rank worth acknowledging by our customs. And yet you were right, and 11 of my captains were wrong. I got lucky with the math," Marcus said honestly. "But I wasn't lucky about caring whether your people lived. That part wasn't luck. That was just." He hesitated. "That was just what you do." The council had made a terrible mistake, and every delegate in the room now knew it, because the Doskani envoy who had mocked him now stood in stunned silence. Because Kessa Vol-Ethi, the young engineer who risked her career on a stranger's warning, was being reassigned that very hour, not in punishment but in honor, elevated to Fleet Diagnostics Command by a queen who valued results over pedigree. And because somewhere in that chamber, the Vekari military doctrine that had stood unquestioned for 4,000 years, strength decides truth, had just been quietly, irrevocably broken by a human with a broken datapad and a conscience he refused to compromise. Which brings us back to the throne room. 3 days later, Queen Solvane stood before Marcus again. This time with the full weight of the Hive-Court watching, informed now of what had transpired, of a human who asked for nothing and saved thousands anyway. "Step aside, human," she had commanded, testing him one final time to see if the humility was real or performance. And when every fleet commander in that chamber saluted him instead of obeying her, she understood they weren't saluting rank. Marcus Reyes had none worth mentioning by Vekari law. They were saluting the only person in that room who had told them a hard truth when a comfortable lie would have been safer, and who had stayed to prove it, even facing execution, because turning away wasn't in him. Queen Solvane lowered her antennae, not in submission, but in something the Vekari reserved for equals. "There is a word in our language," she said quietly, "for one who serves the truth over the throne. We have not needed it in 1,000 years." She looked at the human standing unarmed, unranked, and unshaken before her entire empire. "Perhaps," she said, "it is time we remembered it." Marcus said nothing. He simply stood there, still holding the same battered datapad, still wearing a uniform 2 sizes too big. And somehow in that moment he had never looked more like exactly where he belonged.